Welcome to the 6th Annual Conference for Studies on the Baha'i Faith. The title now is much simplified, and since April the 12th, we have a new name, which is the Association for Baha'i Studies, as you can see here. Our first speaker today is well known to all, Dr. Hossain Danesh. His subject will be the psychological and spiritual aspects of personal growth. Dr. Hossain Danesh, who is an MB and an associate professor of psychiatry at the University of Ottawa and director of the Family Therapy Program, the Thanatology Service. And Hossain said last night, the study of death or deathology. He was born in 1938 in Iran. He received his MD at the University of Isfahan Medical School in 1961. He specialized in psychiatry at the Illinois State Psychiatric Institute in Chicago and the University of British Columbia in Vancouver. Dr. Danesh has had a lifelong involvement with the Baha'i community and is presently chairman of the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of Canada. He is also the chairman of the executive committee of the Association for Baha'i Studies and is a member of the editorial board of Baha'i Studies. Also, he's a frequent contributor to psychiatric and Baha'i publications. Dr. Danesh has lectured widely throughout Canada, United States, Europe, and Iran. Without further words, I would like to introduce our very good friend, Dr. Danesh.
Thank you very much, Joyce. It's always one of the beautiful things about the Baha'i faith is that science and arts have been raised to the level of worship, and it is really an honor to be introduced by a very famous and accomplished Baha'i artist, which Joyce is. And one of the objectives of the association, of course, is to bring all aspects of the human endeavor to work in a harmonious and integrated manner. I have about 45 minutes to cover a topic that I have been working on, and by no means is finished, for about 18 years. Some of the results of that thinking I have been able to put in the form of about 80 to 100 pages of typewritten pages. Of course, I would not be reading all of those for you. Rather, what I would do is to try to share with you some of the fundamental issues related to this whole area of human nature and what we are, who we are, and how we function as human beings. As you know, this is in the domain of psychology and psychiatry, as well as a number of other sciences and disciplines. So what I am going to try to do here is to, first of all, share with you the struggle that a Baha'i psychiatrist would have, or psychologist, in trying to understand the formulations that exist in the world today and trying to put them in the context of the Baha'i teachings There are several schools of thinking about the nature of the human being and how we function and how we behave. Some of them, the most famous of them, of course, are one of them is psychoanalytic school. Now, very briefly, I want to share with you what we find in the psychoanalytic school of thinking about how the human behavior comes about. And basically, here we would focus on the works of Freud. I read for you. According to the Freudian school of psychoanalysis, man's life is basically shaped by the powerful instinctual forces called variably as life instinct, death instinct, the pleasure principle, the sexual and aggressive drives, and so forth. All these terms and concepts primarily state that the motivating force in human behavior is the need for gratification of basic instinctual drives on the one hand, and avoidance of the painful and unpleasurable circumstances on the other. So this is really at the core of what is said, that the human behavior is shaped in order to fulfill the gratification needs of the individual and to avoid pain and so forth. So, for example, in the Freudian school of thinking, I very briefly say a few things here that you see how it works. They focus on conation, which is human striving, and affection, which is human emotions, and cognition, which is the thoughts. And basically it is believed that all three of them come about as a result of the child's desire to fulfill its instinctual needs and to avoid the pain that is there. And if you want the references and so forth, I could give it to you. But I'll give you an example about the striving, how the human being comes about to strive something, which is conation. He says that conation is the act or faculty of striving or making an effort. According to the psychoanalytic model, at the core of all human striving is the need and consequent effort to satisfy basic instinctual drives. An example of conation is found in the following behavior sequence according to the psychoanalysts. Restlessness and tension, which is the source in the drive, will subside when the child has the opportunity to see the mother's breast and suck on it. From looking at that, the psychoanalyst says, okay, the child needs the mother's breast, and he sucks on it, then he calms down, and then, therefore, he is beginning now to learn how to strive for things. That you strive for the things that gratifies your needs. At one level, of course, this kind of a observation is accurate. But as we will come later to it, you will see that there are some fundamental shortcomings in thinking that all the human striving comes from the needs of the child to satisfy its hunger, and therefore striving in that manner. There are many others, but I just wouldn't go into details of that. Hopefully this would be available in a publication form for you. Another school of psychiatry and human behavior, which has had considerable effect in our society, of course, is the behaviorism. And here again, the behaviorist school thinks of the human being as fundamentally a being which responds to what is pleasurable and avoids what is not pleasurable. And here again, the idea is that what we call human freedom or human will, or all of the ideologies that man has, the concepts that has, those really don't have any foundations and base in and by themselves. That they are the result of this fundamental behavior pattern. And therefore, for example, Skinner, who is one of the main spokesmen of these schools of thinking, he believes that really there is no such a thing as a free human being, as an autonomous man, as he called it. Autonomous man, he means an individual who really can make decisions, who can say, I will this, and I wish this, and I make this decision, and I think this way, or I think that way. This kind of a man, about this kind of man, Skinner says, his autonomous man, his abolition has long been overdue. Autonomous man is a device used to explain what we cannot explain in any other way. He has been constructed from our ignorance, and as our understanding increases, the very stuff of which he is composed vanishes. Science does not dehumanize man, it dehumanizes him. It must do so if it is to prevent the abolition of the human species. To man qua man, we readily say good riddance. Only by dispossessing him can we turn to the real causes of human behavior. Only then can we turn from the inferred to the observed, and from the miraculous to the natural, from the inaccessible to the manipulable. It goes on. What he is saying, in essence, is that there is no such a thing as a free man, and there is no such a thing as an autonomous man, because if you have an autonomous man, you cannot study him scientifically. He goes on to say, it is often said that in doing so, we must treat the man who survives as a mere animal. Animal is a pejorative term, but only because man has been made spuriously honorific. Crutch has argued that whereas the traditional view supports Hamlet's exclamation, "How like a god," Pavlov, the behavioral scientist, emphasized, "How like a dog." But that was a step forward. A god is the archetypal pattern of an explanatory fiction, of a miracle-working mind, of the metaphysical. Man is much more than a dog, but like dog, he is within the range of a scientific analysis. And this is the kind of a view that we find in all of the literature about the human being and the nature of human being in psychiatric, psychological disciplines. Now, when we think about it, we will see that this kind of a view doesn't really correspond with our own experience as human beings. That our experiences as human beings doesn't allow us to think of ourselves as dogs, and allow us to think of ourselves doing things simply because of those instinctual needs that have been operative in us as an individual, as a child. Furthermore, we as Baha'is, we are aware of a body of knowledge that takes man far beyond this level of thinking and gives man a quality of being a spiritual being. And the question, therefore, arises here, what is a spiritual being? And can we describe a spiritual being in such a way that would be acceptable to the scientific world on the one hand, and also it would be possible to evaluate it, study it, and so forth in an appropriate manner. There is a section here that I would not refer to you, and that is about the scientific method. But as you know, in the Baha'i faith, it is absolutely essential that what we do would be in accord to the science and logic. And therefore, we have to understand what is the scientific method and how we can use it. Of course, the most excellent reference that you have in that is, in my opinion, the 3 papers written by Bill Hatcher on science of religion, which are excellent sources of studying this aspect, and I would not go into that aspect at all. Now, what I like to do here, I like to share with you what I understand in studying the Baha'i writings on the one hand, and the scientific writings that are available on the other hand, what I understand a spiritual being means, and what it means, what is human nature in the light of the writings of the Baha'i faith. To do so, first of all, we have to make a few definitions. First of all, we have to define what the word spirit means. Because if we don't make that definition, we would be confused all the way through, and we are not going to be talking at the same language. Besides that, we have to decide what spiritual means, and whether these two are the same or not. And after we have done that, then we are talking a language that we hopefully all agree upon and understand. The word spirit, as it is used in the context of my talk, which I have taken it from the writings of the Baha'i faith, is that quality that makes a given level of existence and a given being, in essence, what that being is. I'll give you an example. Abdul Baha says that in the world of creation, in the material world, we have several kingdoms. One is the mineral kingdom. The mineral kingdom is characterized by composition, characterized by elements coming together and staying together. And therefore, this quality of composition is mineral spirit. You see, it's not something that says wow or this or that, or you see it in the sky or anything. The quality of composition makes the mineral a mineral, and therefore it is called the mineral spirit. The next level of existence that we see is that of the vegetables and the plants. And what plants have, on the one hand, is composition, which is similar to the mineral, but on the other hand, they have a quality of growth. This quality of growth is the vegetable or plant spirit. Okay? Another word is that quality that makes a plant compared to the minerals. The next level of that, of course, is that of animals. Now, animals, first of all, are composed in the same manner that minerals are composed and vegetables. They also grow in the same manner that vegetables do. But in addition to that, animals have the capacity of the 5 senses. They see, they hear, they can touch, they can taste, and they can smell. And also they can move about. They go places. These two qualities of the senses and of movement are what is called the animal spirit. Therefore, animals, on the one hand, are like vegetables, composed. On the other hand, they grow like okay, you understand what I mean. Finally, they have this quality of growth and senses. Now, if we consider human beings to be like animals, therefore what we would do, we would put the utmost importance on feelings, on senses, on how something feels, on how something you touch it, or what you see. Those things become the absolute substance of reality. And that's very interesting, because that's really, in essence, what is happening in the world today. That people say scientific issues are those things that you can see it, and you can touch it, and you can smell it. And if they are not anything of that nature, then therefore they don't exist. Now, what is a human being? A human being has the qualities of the mineral, is composed of those things, has the qualities of the vegetable kingdom, grows, has the qualities of the animal kingdom, it has the feelings, senses, and it has the capacity to move. And on the top of that, the human being has the capacity of intelligence, of understanding, of comprehension. This capacity to understand, to discover, the intelligence, this what is called in the Baha'i literature as rational soul or soul, which is the power of understanding of a human being. This power of understanding of a human being, this intelligence of man, is the human spirit. So what really distinguishes man from the animals is his power of understanding, is his intelligence. And this is essential for us to understand, that when we are talking about human spirit or human soul, what we are talking about. The term rational soul or term soul are applied to the human capacity to understand, which is, according to the Baha'i concept of man, is the rational soul of man. Now, at this level, all human beings are the same. In other words, all human beings are created with the capacity to understand, to a varying degree and to a different types and so forth, but nevertheless, we all are the possessors of this capacity to understand. And it is that capacity that results in the human being creating the sciences, the arts, the civilization, and everything that we find and we have that distinguishes us from the animal kingdom. Now, having described what is the spirit, the human spirit in this terminology, we haven't described what is the spiritual. The two are not related to one another necessarily. Okay? All human beings are the possession of their soul or the rational soul, but that doesn't mean that we have arrived at the definition of a spirituality. Now, the important issue here is that the Baha'i faith sees other levels of existence that are not material. in their nature. What we have described so far, all are composed of matter, and they are material of nature. The human being is between one level of existence, which is the material level of existence. We have our bodies. And on the other hand, we are composed of we are of a reality that is not composed, which is our spiritual reality. And here, Abdul Baha says that there are other levels of existence. And these other levels of existence, I don't go into details about them, but they are fundamentally, they are related to the level of the manifestation, the divine manifestation, which creates the kingdom of the divine manifestation and the spirit of faith. And then there is the Holy Spirit, and then there is God, the unknowable essence. Man is between these two levels. On the one hand, the human being has the capacity to live the life of an intelligent animal. Or on the other hand, he has the capacity to allow his rational soul to be affected by these teachings of the manifestation of God. And at that level, you are talking about the spiritual being. I read here something that Abdul Baha says in this respect, which is very interesting. Abdul Baha says that here we are talking with the illumination of the divine spirit, there is love, acceptance, cooperation, truthfulness, and so forth. And here is a quote by Abdul Baha. He said, if the spiritual qualities of the soul, meaning the power of understanding of the human being, open to the breath of the divine spirit, which is the teachings of the manifestation of God, are never used, they become atrophied, enfeebled, and at last incapable. Whilst the soul's material qualities alone being exercised, they become terribly powerful, and the unhappy, misguided man becomes more savage, more unjust, more vile, more cruel, more malevolent than the lower animals themselves. All his aspirations and desires being strengthened by the lower side of the soul's nature, he becomes more and more brutal until his whole being is in no way superior to that of the beasts that perish. Men such as this plan the work of evil. They plan to work evil, to hurt and to destroy. They are entirely without the spirit of divine compassion, for the celestial quality of the soul has been dominated by that of the material. If, on the contrary, the spiritual nature of the soul has been so strengthened that it holds the material side in subjection, then as the man approaches the divine, his humanity becomes so glorified that the virtues of the celestial assembly are manifested in him, and he radiates the mercy of God. What Abdul Baha is speaking is this, that the human being has the capacity to allow his rational soul, to allow his power of understanding, to either focus only on material issues, and therefore, if he does that, the results would be darkness and cruelty and injustice. And this is what we see in the world today. Or he has the capacity to allow his power of understanding to be illumined by the teachings of the manifestation of God, and therefore the results would be the opposite of that process. Now, having said this, that is not enough yet, because we have to really focus on to see whether we can come up with an outline of what the human being really is, how he functions, what is the function of the feelings, what is the function of will, what is the function of thoughts, and how they interact and interrelate with one another. So I like to put forward with you an outline of what it seems to me to be a very sketchy outline of a human character or personality. It seems to me that we have to first focus on that we have two basic components. One is our physical component, and the other one is our rational soul. The physical component has a short period of life. It stays here for a while and decomposes and dies. And the rational soul, or the power of understanding of man, because it's not composed, it would continue its existence, and it would continue throughout to evolve and grow. Now, the second aspect of a sketch of a human being are the basic capacities. And it seems to me that there are three basic capacities we can identify in human beings. These three basic capacities are capacity to know, capacity to feel, and capacity to will. We talked a little bit about human capacity to know, and I said that this is at the core of what we were talking about. Human capacity to know encompasses both the experiential and the acquired types of knowledge, and is dependent upon thinking and reasoning processes. Human sciences, discoveries, and inventions are some direct byproducts of human cognition and capacity to know. Human feelings are fundamentally of two types: those which are pleasurable and those which are unpleasant. Emotions and feelings at one level are the indicators of the state of the being of the person. Therefore, pain and suffering indicate a state of disease and disorder of a physical, psychological, or spiritual nature. Anger, fear, and anxiety point to the presence of a danger, and threat to the integrity of the individual. Contentment indicates the state of health and freedom from disease and disorder. Joy and happiness occur when the individual is engaged in a process that enhances not only his physical health, but also fulfills his intellectual, emotional, social, and spiritual needs and aspirations. Therefore, human feelings indicate to us in what state we are. When we feel good, it means that the process of our health at one level or another is okay, and so forth. Human will refers to the ability to choose between good and evil, and praiseworthy acts and blameworthy activities. As Abdul Baha states, some things are subject to the free will of man, such as justice, equity, tyranny, and injustice, as well as all the good and evil actions. However, he continues, there are certain things to which man is forced and compelled, such as sleep, which I am putting you in, death, sickness, decline of power, injuries, and misfortunes. So what we have here is that I'm trying to describe here, that it seems to me that the basic capacities of a human being is the capacity to know, to feel, and to will. And there are basic processes at work in human being, and those processes are the processes of knowledge, volition, and action. They are very similar to, of course, basic capacities. And they are self-explanatory. I don't want to go into details of that. Now, why I say these things is this, that by and large, in human sciences, we have a tendency to take away the human responsibility from them. That the tendency is to tell people that you were raised in a bad family and that's the reason that you are behaving the way that you are. Or we would say to the people that you had a very traumatic experience, and that's why your life situation has become this way. Although those issues are to some extent accurate, they are not the whole picture. And consequently, we have taken away from the human beings the capacity to be creative, the capacity to design their lives, the capacity to go about what they have to do in their existence. And to follow this process, I'd like to give you, I'm going to just go about 58 pages, and not to say anything about those 58 pages, and to say something here to you about the whole area of focusing on human behavior in respect to when they go to psychotherapy and try to solve some problems. It seems to me that most all psychopathology, most of the problems that people have is related, if it is not of an organic nature, is related to the misconception about their own nature and the nature of creation. That people misunderstand what is their own nature, they have a wrong impression of their own being, usually they have a negative impression of what they are, and consequently they cannot act as a noble human being, rather they would act according to the concept that they have of themselves. And what psychiatry does, hopefully, is to put that wrong misconception to correct it and put it in a positive sense. The second source of psychopathology is that many people have a wrong conception of what the world is all about. In other words, what other people are about, whether they can trust other people, whether they can allow other people to know them, whether they allow themselves to be intimate with other people, or it's a dangerous thing to do. And therefore, they have a misconception of themselves, and they have the misconception of the world. And the third major psychopathology that comes about, and I see quite often, is the kind of the psychopathology which is related to meaninglessness of life. Many people find their existence meaningless. There is no objective for it, there is no goal for it, there is no direction for it. And because of this meaninglessness of life, they organize their existence in such a manner that after a while, for the first time, they are busy with a lot of things. They do this and that, they belong to this group and that group, they spend the time meditating, they spend the time thinking, spend the time being with other people, drinking, watching TV, fishing, God knows what. They do all kinds of things. But there comes the time that all those activities fundamentally do not give the necessary meaning that they need. Doesn't satisfy what they have to have. And consequently, it results in a life that is meaningless, is purposeless. And here again, you have a fundamental basis of psychopathology at hand. I'm reminded of a person who was a professor in his field, and he was a world authority in the area of his work. And when he came for consultation to me, he was faced with a dilemma which was very interesting. The dilemma was that he had not finished his thesis for PhD degree. And he had worked on it for 5 years. And he had been given notification that if he didn't finish his PhD by 3 months' time, that he would lose his opportunity to get that degree from the university that he was. Now, the members of his committee were his ex-students. They had told him, you just type anything. We are not going to read it even. And you bring it to us and we give you your PhD. Because you know more than we know about the topic that you're going to write. And this man, every time that he sat to write his gibberish, as he put it, he would get so anxious that he would take some tranquilizers. Then he would get kind of groggy and would start drink. And suddenly he would find himself that he has been sitting there 12 hours, 14 hours, hasn't done anything. So he came and we start talking, and he finished his PhD, got his thesis, got his PhD. And the day after got his PhD, he came to my office. He sat there. He was half drunk, crying. He said, Hossain, now what? And then he started telling me the following. He said when he was a child, he was born in a ghetto. And he decided at that time that he would, in his life, accomplish the following. That he would become a professor at a university, that he would become a well-known authority in his field, that he would have a wife and 3 children, that he would be well-to-do and have a good life, he would be famous, and above all, he would have a PhD. He said, I had accomplished all of those 5 years ago, and I could not finish my PhD. He said, I realized last night why I couldn't finish my PhD, because look what you have done to me now. There is nothing for me to live for any longer. Because he has achieved the highest achievement that he has kept in mind. And he has had. And consequently, it was the meaninglessness of his life. It was the purposelessness of his life. It was the lack of direction that has caused him the anguish and the pain that it was. Therefore, gradually is emerging that it seems to me what psychotherapy does, and first of all what we have to do, is to develop a framework within which the human being emerges not as an animal, but emerges as a spiritual being, independent of animals, in possession of his spiritual qualities, is in possession of knowledge, in possession of will, and using his feelings as in indicators of where the state of his health and well-being is, that this human being then has the opportunity to go to either direction in his existence as he wants. But because we know that a healthy mind is very much dependent on a healthy body, and because we know that the two processes and development of a character is extremely important, then when we are talking about human growth, individual growth and change, we have to think of the past, the present, and the future. If an individual has been raised under circumstances that the past was traumatic, that would cause enough of a difficulty in the fundamental working of the psyche of that individual, that would make it difficult for his rational soul, for his spiritual capacities to manifest themselves to the fullest level possible. And here is where psychotherapy comes into picture. It seems to me the most important service that psychotherapy can do is to allow the individual to resolve the conflicts that are related to the unhealthy, inappropriate upbringing that has been related to the past, and to some extent can modify our view of ourselves and of our world. But this modification can be helped and augmented and actually made realistic if it is done in the light of the spiritual teachings of a manifestation. Because what it does, what the spiritual orientation does, is that it gives the meaning to the life of the individual. It gives the purpose, it gives a direction. While psychotherapy reflects on the past, the spiritual illumination not only clarifies the past and the present, but it directs the future and paves the way for the future and outlines the future. And because of these qualities, therefore, we are going to be in need of a comprehensive system which would take into account all of the psychological difficulties that are there and try to correct them, and then would also provide the individual with the meaning and direction in life. But it is not the role of the therapist to provide the meaning and direction in life. It is the role of the individual himself to have that direction chosen. Because as you know, and it is becoming gradually very clear in my mind, one of the most profound and important activities that an individual can get involved in is the independent investigation of the truth. And independent investigation of the truth simply means that the individual, through process of trying to acquire self-knowledge, which is psychological self and the past and all of those, reaches to the level that then he has to decide for his future and upon the direction of his future. And in that, and give meaning to his life now, in the past, and for the future. And for those kind of processes, when you want to give a framework, when you want to give a meaning, here is where the spiritual aspect of existence acquires its importance. It has been a disjointed talk. I'm sorry about it, but it's a kind of a thing that would be disjointed for me for about a couple of 100 years. But I would work on it, and I'm sure others would work on it. Thank you very much.